Action Hour with the Whidbey Environmental Action Network. On this podcast, we will be discussing environmental issues affecting Whidbey and Camano Islands in Washington State, diving into ecology and policy impact, and educating you on what you can do about it. I'm your host, Amanda Bullis. In this inaugural episode, I want to introduce you, or reintroduce you, to the WEAN founders who started it all, Marianne Edain and Steve Erickson. Marianne and Steve have been working tirelessly on ecological conservation efforts in Island County for over 40 years and are responsible for saving critical lands on Whidbey and Camano Islands, including the prairie land at PRI, Trillium Forest, Saratoga Woods, and many more. Cool. Okay. So we're already recording, so I hope you are both ready to answer some questions. I want to first ask you, how did you first become involved in environmental activism? When was the first time you realized how much you cared about the environment? Like, in terms of your origin story, where does it begin? Does it begin on Whidbey Island? Does it begin before Whidbey Island? Were you a little baby when you realized it? Where did it start?
So starting about 1 million years ago in Vienna, Austria, there's an organization called the Nature Friends. And it's an avowedly socialistic organization, and it was formed in the late 1800s, and my grandmother was a founding member.
Wow.
And its purpose in the world was to bring common, ordinary working people, make it possible for them to go hiking out in the mountains and not have to go to an expensive hostel or other place of accommodation overnight. So they call them huts. Boy, the cabin outside of LA is not a hut, let me tell you. But they built places, and this was, working people using the skills that they would otherwise get paid to use to build these places out in the mountains so that folks could, go from one to another and not have to spend money and be able to spend time outside. So I was raised in the Nature Friends, and it was just, that's what you did.
That's really kind of fascinating. And so you grew up with the Nature Friends, and then how did your own sense of environmental activism evolve from there throughout your life?
Well, so when I was living in San Francisco, the San Francisco chapter, the Muir Woods chapter, basically they have a clubhouse within a short hike of the Muir Woods, which is, across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. So I spent a fair amount of time in the Muir Woods house. And then when I was living in San Francisco, I was working in the post office, and I got off work at 2:00 in the morning. It was swing shift. But eventually I was able to buy a VW bus, and I had my sleeping bag and whatever I needed in the bus. And instead of going home, I would just go out across the bridge and go to the Muir Woods. And there was one particular redwood tree that was basically semi-hollow at the base. And you just take your sleeping bag and, sleep out the rest of the night in that semi-hollow tree. So the other place, the Muir Woods, is at the bottom of the mountain, and Mount Tam is the Nature Friends cabin is on the side of Mount Tam. The Muir Woods is at the bottom, and there's a road that goes up to the top of Mount Tam, and alternately I'd sleep in one of those redwoods or between two big boulders on the top of the mountain. And
what did you like best about sleeping outside there? Like, what was it that you enjoyed about it?
Well, I've always hated cities. I grew up mostly in Los Angeles, and the nightmare was, and I had it recurring many times, that I would take a shovel and go outside and try to dig a hole, and I would hit concrete. And that would freak me out. And I would run to another place and try and dig a hole, and I would hit concrete. And this would happen over and over until I woke up, all sweaty and uptight. And when I left LA, for some reason, in San Francisco, and I was living in an apartment in the city, but being able to be out there, either tucked in a redwood or up on top of Mount Tam, and waking up early in the morning as the sun is shining down on what, if you were in San Francisco, it would be fog and clouds. But on top of Mount Tam, you're looking down on the fog and clouds. Mm-hmm. And then slowly watching the sun burn off those clouds was, it was the antidote.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Steve? How did you come to this work?
Let's see. I grew up in Maryland, in Baltimore, until I was about 10 or 11. Then we moved out to what was then the outer fringes of suburbia. Mm-hmm. Let's see. There was an oak tree in our backyard, big old oak, that we used to climb in and, from there onto the garage roof and back. And, I always remember that oak tree. And, we'd go out big tent camping on cots and stuff in the state park, Patapsco State Park, which is by the Patapsco River, which I remember sort of playing around in. Split when I was about 17 or so because the revolution was around the corner. And anyway, yuck, Baltimore.
What revolution? Explain for our listeners what revolution was around the corner.
Old people who were around in the 1960s. The revolution was going to dismantle American imperialism around the world and usher in a brave new era of something or other. We weren't exactly sure what, but we figured it really couldn't be any worse there. Mm-hmm. Actually, probably could have been worse, but it would have had to work at it for that, for sure.
You felt called by it.
Yeah. A lot of people around draft days felt called by it.
Okay. All right. For some context. Right. Okay.
So let's see. Ended up about, I guess in the early 70s, kind of alternating between Cambridge, Mass, and where I was hanging out, and northeastern Vermont on some land there called Earth People's Park, or to call it Earth People's Puddle, which was land that was being purchased by the Hog Farm Commune or Collective out of California, or maybe New Mexico. I was never really clear on their origins totally.
First were San Francisco.
Okay, for all the peoples of the earth. Of course, some peoples of the earth worked harder than others at making land payments, but that's a whole nother tale of cleaning up trash after 500,000 people rock concerts. So I won't diverge into that.
No, not right now. Another time.
60s memorabilia is what this will devolve into. So anyway, so I was sort of around there off and on, hung out, wandered around the woods there. Was fairly peripatetic, I guess would be the word, traveling around. Oh yeah, and then I was in Colorado for a while, living west of Boulder at about 9,000 feet, mostly in lean-tos and teepees and occasional snow caves for a year or so, a couple of years. And in our area, it was a situation similar to Washington, where you've got the checkerboarded trust lands, sort of similar in that one square mile, I think it was 1 square mile out of every township probably had been given to the school boards to raise money And so the school board in our area, actually, I don't think it was our area, it was out of Denver, wanted to lease an area that was a wetland at around 8,300 feet to Exxon for uranium prospecting. Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was somewhat involved, in concern and opposition to that, and also a molybdenum mine that did go in later. That was my first exposure to the wonders of environmental impact statements.
Oh, I was wondering. So in Colorado, that specific, was that the first time you engaged specifically in the legal aspect of environmental action?
I mean, I was pretty peripheral.
When did you land on Whidbey? Each of you. I think Marianne arrived first.
Yeah. Then in the late 70s, I was mostly back up in the Northwest, mostly around Eastern Washington, Seattle sporadically. And
when were you in Prince George?
That would have been the year before I met you. Yeah, I was up in Canada tree planting. And at one point, by then I knew enough ecology. So I looked around, I'm in the middle of this 600-acre clear-cut bog where we're planting, little spruce trees. And usually when you go out to plant for a day, you have a partner. The idea is, so you can pace each other, right? Keep your momentum up. And mine was this young guy from the Netherlands, and he goes out there one morning, and we're out there. He's going, "This is so nature. It's so beautiful." And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, this is the middle of a 600-acre clear cut. We're planting these little trees that are probably not going to grow as big as what was here for another 100 or 200 years at that. And I sort of, at that point, just kind of decided I wasn't going to do that anymore after that year anyway. And there was sometime around there, I'd been out mushroom picking and eaten some psilocybin, and I was in an ancient forest over in the Olympics, and I sort of, grokked that everything was connected. I mean, I literally looked at this hillside, and I actually saw, what I didn't realize then, now I would interpret as mycelium, but my hallucination was that, the soil was alive with threads and they were going into the trees, and, it was all connected.
Yeah, which actually has been scientifically proven.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I didn't realize it at that time. Okay, so I was kind of around Eastern Washington. I sort of had the bug of, I'm going to help heal the earth. And so I got into seed collecting, wildland seed collecting. And then at the end of one year, I guess 1980 it would have been. 81, after picking apples, I bought a 1963 International pickup, filled it with various odds and ends. And after the barter fair in the Okanagan, there was a barter fair on Whidbey Island. So I went to Whidbey Island, and I didn't have any more money for gas. And I met Marianne, and I got pneumonia. And the rest is history, I guess. That's how I ended up on Whidbey Island. It was kind of odd because most of the people I was meeting on Whidbey Island were people coming from urban areas who were, Whidbey is so wild. And I looked at Whidbey and I said, well, even then I sort of realized it was going to become suburbia. And I said, yeah, it really already was then. But, to me, it was like pretty tame compared to a lot of the places where I'd been. So that was kind of an interesting difference in perspective between all the people running around Whidbey, who were thinking they would move to the wilderness, downtown, practically, next to Seattle, of course. Actually, compared to actually living in a city, maybe not, but, basically downtown. And then pretty early on, Marianne dragged me to a planning commission meeting. Okay.
The article that I read, it said it was your first date. Was at a planning commission meeting? Is that accurate?
We'd already been together for a while.
Okay.
It was a great soundbite, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and at that I think it was at that planning commission meeting, a local person you may encounter, at one point he got up and talked about how land functions as currency on the island. And I just found that really reprehensible and, you know, just totally foreign to my values.
Yeah, land is currency. That's a pretty intense statement to make, and just
So
very
sort of involved somewhat in getting Island County to finally pass a zoning code. Island County had interim zoning.
We worked with Dearborn.
Yeah, well, Island County had interim zoning longer than any other county in the United States ever.
What is interim zoning?
Island County began the process. Okay, if you drive through a place like, interim, temporary, in between, partial until you get the final thing done. You know, if you drive through some counties out in Idaho or something, I don't know if this is still the case, but they used to have signs on the highways entering, something county and zoning, building permits required, Well, Island County didn't have zoning until in the 1960s, I think 1968. 66, they finally began the process of adopting a zoning code. And in 1983, they still hadn't adopted zoning code.
Okay, I'm gonna sidebar you here because I want to do a whole episode on zoning in Island County and specifically talk about zoning.
Part of my evolution, okay?
It's okay. So
okay.
Okay.
I'm not diverting here.
Okay. So continuing on your evolution, your zoning evolution.
Every time, they'd almost have the planning commission or something or the county commissioners would have something ready to adopt. All these screaming good old boys would come out of the woodwork and we didn't know about this, blah, 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 and back it would go. And this went on and on. Finally, around then, they hired a high-powered attorney, and I won't go into that now, who, rammed it through basically in 1984. And the code actually had the first wetland protection ordinance in the state of Washington.
Oh, wow. That is significant.
Which was totally ignored about 1989 when I, brought a case about that. But then in between then, people got really hot about roadside spraying. And after a lot of effort, we basically got the county to back down on it and stop roadside spraying pretty much.
That's a whole other adventure.
That's another adventure. Then in 1980, towards late 87, Trillium Corporation out of Bellingham kind of waltzed on in and started clear cutting everything in sight. Marianne give you a lot more stuff on this.
It's time to switch out.
But let me keep going here. But they basically they bought a shitload of forest land from different companies that were leaving the Northwest. And this was their dribs and drabs. They hadn't logged because they were operationally difficult. They were too small to bother with. But so they got like over 2,000 acres on Whidbey Island. And they came in, with feller bunchers. And all of a sudden, 40 acres outside of Langley is leveled in like 2 days. And people go, what? So that became a big deal. We, Marianne and I had sort of been peripheral with Earth First. This is the original Earth First that was direct action and made saving ancient forests, a national issue.
Oh, okay. I don't know about Earth First.
Well, Earth First now has evolved into a bunch of kind of, I don't know, weird anarchist types. But direct action, they were notorious, at least metaphorically, for tree spiking, the idea being that if you put nails in the trees, they couldn't be milled or it would take months.
Oh, is that true that they couldn't be milled, or was that just the thought?
It is true.
It is true. So if you put so they were putting nails in trees to stop them from being cut down.
People got in the way of the saws. Okay. And it happened on Whidbey back in 77.
Oh, really?
First Classic U by State Park.
Let me talk about it.
Okay, you go.
Oh, back. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna swap, and I want to hear about this, but I also want to go back to ask Marianne the same question that I asked Steve, which is, how did you end up on Whidbey Island? Now we know that Steve came after Marianne, but Marianne came first. So how did you end up out here?
Okay, so the long trajectory. I actually I am from the Netherlands. We came to the U.S. when I was 5. Grew up in L.A. Hated it. Couldn't stand it. Went to college out in the valley and lived in the canyons outside the valley. Went from there to San Francisco and had the safety valve of being able to sleep in the redwoods and on top of Mount Tam. From San Francisco, I was, while he was busy avoiding the draft, I was busy being a draft and military counselor. I was working with all those young men who really were not interested in going to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And my apartment became a safe house. And it became fairly obvious at one point. Basically, the FBI was constantly beating on the front door. These were people. What?
Literally, the FBI was beating on your front door?
Oh, quite literally, very literally.
Okay.
Exciting time.
Anyway, I was in a relationship with somebody who was wanted for mutiny. And we kind of decided that it was time to get him out of the city. That's part of why the FBI was beating on the front door. But also, I had all of these AWOL people and runaways and others in the apartment. And so we threw everything in my little Peugeot station wagon, including these giant sacks of grain and stuff like that on the roof. And 5 adults, and my son was 1 year old at the time. Actually, it was just before his first birthday. And we were headed up to a commune on the Klamath River in Siskiyou County. And we got busted. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You were not it didn't seem like you were very inconspicuous.
She was not terribly unusual.
No, not terribly unusual at the time. But anyway, the upshot was that my son's godparents came and took him, thank goodness. The rest of us spent time in jail. My then partner, Richard, they discovered who he was and hauled him off to, for some reason, Fort Ord, which is outside of Monterey, about 100 and some miles south of San Francisco. So, I spent the time in jail.
How long?
It was only, first there was the, pre-trial period, and that was about a week, and then pled guilty, got sentenced to 15 days. So, all told, it was less than a month, but it's very interesting. I actually, I still have my jailhouse journal.
No way.
Absolutely. Cool. Written in my very small, very crabby handwriting. And whenever things got a little questionable, I'd switch into Dutch. So that in case it was confiscated, they wouldn't be able to theoretically read, those parts. Anyway, eventually I got out. They had pretty much dismantled the Peugeot, and so it was barely running. Got my son and headed down to Monterey to see if I could get Richard out, and spent about 4 months living in the Peugeot which is interesting when you've got a 1-year-old. Anyhow, finally got Richard out. And, okay, here was this whole 4-month ordeal, but then went back up to the Klamath River, up to the commune. And we bounced around because, okay, Steve talked about the checkerboard lands. In the 1860s, the federal government gifted every other square mile for 20 miles on either side of any declared railroad line, whether, it's like, I'm going to build a railroad, so you give me all this land. And we are still dealing with the checkerboard lands all over the country. And Klamath River, where there was never any railroad, thank you, but somebody declared an intent to build a railroad along the Klamath River. And so there are checkerboard lands all the way up and down the river. And the first place that we lived was on checkerboard land. So theoretically, it was not national forest. But the Forest Service burned us out of that place. And we found a mining shack a mile upriver, and that was on national forest. And they burned us out of that one.
When you say burned out, do you mean literally burned you out of your home?
Yeah, they set fire to it. They poured gasoline on it.
I'm trying to figure out what is literal and what is figurative in the storytelling.
Oh, sorry.
So far it's been all literal. So
yeah. No, they burned us out of 2 places, at which point we said, you know what, let's just put down some money. They can't burn us out if we own the place. So we bought 15 acres at Horse Creek, or up the Middle Creek Road from Horse Creek off the Klamath River. And I was living there. And earlier on, I had met our friend Tom, and he just phoned. I have known Tom for nearly 55 years now. And anyway, I came up to Whidbey Island to visit Tom in 1973. I just didn't get around to leaving.
Why did you stay? What was it about Whidbey?
Okay, what is now the Robshouten Gallery back then had that used to be the Langley State Bank. And the bank moved to a new building, the one, the big parking lot on 2nd Street there. That was the bank. And so the old building was sitting empty. So a bunch of hippies got together and created the Soup Coop. And Tom took me to the Soup Coop, like one of the first days I was on the island. And it was, I don't know how to describe it, but people were outgoing, friendly, wanting to absorb you into the community, non-judgmental. I was like, okay, I'm home. And yeah, like Steve said, coming from the Klamath River, where, up Horse Creek, we were only 2 miles from pavement. The first place they burned us out of, we were 8 miles from pavement. But 5 miles from the booming metropolis of Horse Creek, population 115, if you counted the cows. It was nowhere. You were out in the mountains in the national forest. And so, yeah, coming to Whidbey is like, the first place I lived, if you know where the Tilth Market is.
Yeah.
That used to be a 320-acre single piece of property. And there was a ramshackle old farmhouse there. And that's where Tom was staying with various other people. Communal households were common. And so I came to visit Tom there. And the thing is that it was less than a half a mile from the highway. And every time the ferry, dumped a load of traffic, there'd be all that concentrated traffic coming up the highway. And I would go rushing to a window to see who was coming.
Something that you both said that I think is interesting is that you both came from very wild places to Whidbey Island. And that,
Yes.
in fact, it was more like coming to civilization than coming out to the wild. Whereas for other people, this may be the wildest place they've ever lived. And
Yes.
so I'm curious about that because, you know, I'm just curious what it's like to be in community here and whether or not community is part of what has kept you here. And also I'm curious how WEAN came about when you both came together, you know, Marianne, you came to the island, and then Steve, you came to the island, and then you found each other and, you know, went to your first planning meeting, very romantic date. But then how did WEAN come about, and how did the community become involved with WEAN?
Okay, so let me go back. So
Yeah.
73, I came here to visit Tom and ended up staying. And yeah, I mean, all of these people were incredibly supportive. And it was enough, you know, it wasn't the city. I could not have survived in a city or even in Langley town for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, there I was in a farmhouse with 320 acres around me. So there was a fair amount of room. So fast forward a bit to 1977. So what Steve was talking about, the 1 square mile out of every 36, this is a federal thing that when states become states, the federal government gave to the state one section out of every township to generate funds for the state schools. That's what that's about. And one of those sections was across Smuggler's Cove Road from South Whidbey State Park.
Mm-hmm.
And one of Tom's friends and business partners was what's called a Jippo logger. And a Jippo logger is just a one-man outfit.
Okay.
And his name is Jack Noel. And because Jack was officially a logger, he got the request for bids from DNR, State Department of Natural Resources, which oversees those state trust lands, the one section out of every township.
Mm-hmm.
And DNR was proposing to clear cut. In this instance, it was 255 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Right across from the state park. And Jack asked various people, and Tom was one of them, to go have a look at this and see what they thought of it. And Tom asked me to come with him. And we went hacking and slashing. The reason it's called Classic U is that if you're coming from the highway, there's Classic Road.
Mm-hmm.
And Classic Road ends at the top of some pretty steep slopes. And right over the edge of the slopes is where that 255 acres is.
And it was trust land.
And it was university trust land, so Classic U.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Tom and I walked it, bushwhacked it, came back and told Jack that, this should not be logged. Jack filed a lawsuit.
Mm.
And I mean, things got real wild in the summer of 1977 because DNR didn't care about the lawsuit, and they hired an outfit out of Bellingham. I think it was Alpine Logging. Alpine got the contract, and we had spies everywhere. Now, in 1977, there were not a whole lot of telephones, never mind cell phones.
Right.
We just had these networks of people. And so we got the word that, they're out there. They've got bulldozers, they've got chainsaws. And so we all just converged. And my son was 8 years old by then. And they had one bulldozer sitting down on Smuggler's Cove Road. And it occurred to me that I really did not want him and those chainsaws, in the same place.
Yeah.
So I had him, I set him in the scoop of the bulldozer and said, you don't leave. You stay right here. I don't care who says what. You stay right here and I'll be back. And then we walked up into the woods and we got in between the loggers and the trees. And I mean, it was a little weird and a little scary. And we were there until about 2 p.m. when the sheriff finally came around. And so part of what was going on is that at the legal end, I mean, a group called Save the Trees had come together, and I was not a part of Save the Trees at that point. Mm-hmm. But my housemate with Tom was. Anyhow, a judge had agreed to sign a temporary restraining order, but the judge was out fishing somewhere in the Cascades. So there was this team that was chasing up and down the mountains trying to find the judge who was fishing in the Cascades somewhere. And we had to hold off the loggers until they got the judge and got the restraining order signed. So,
well, that's just interesting because it seems like there are two very important things happening at once in terms of action. There's the physical being in place of it all. Like you physically are between, you're protecting the trees with your body, but then there's the legal aspect of it all. This idea of the judge and this particular, the exercising action within the legal system, which.
So, as far as I've been able to find out, that was the first time there had been direct.
Steve is saying
disobedience to protect ancient forests in the Western United States.
Can you hear him at all? Steve is saying,
can you say it again, Marianne?
Yeah, that as far as he's been able to ascertain, this is the first time that people have used direct action to protect forests in the U.S. And we were not, I mean, we're leftover anti-war hippies that is like, when bad things happen, you go demonstrate, you blockade, you do.
The thing is, it didn't become a movement the way.
No, it didn't become a movement. I mean, we did what we did, and we stopped them. And once the judge signed the restraining order, then it all went into court, and it was all legal schmeagles and raise money for the lawyer. And good old Charlie, it took 15 years to pay him off. He nearly went broke. He was the attorney. But I mean, basically, it's like you got to do what you got to do, and we did it. And the thing is that what Save the Trees did, DNR was in a really, really bad position. I mean, the PR was terrible. So through the lawsuit and through Save the Trees, there was created something called the Trust Land Transfer Program. When it became obvious that those damn uppity people were not going to allow DNR to go and log a place, then there was a mechanism to take that land out of DNR's inventory and put it into another ownership that would protect it. Mm-hmm. And I give Sue Ellen a lot of credit because she was very instrumental in making the Trust Land Transfer Program happen. And this year, we've been fighting in the legislature to fund it again. But through the Trust Land Transfer Program, and again, it took 15 years, that 255 acres got added to South Whidbey State Park.
So if you go up Bush Point Road, South Whidbey State Park, everything inland was part of that.
Now there's 7 acres that we added afterwards.
Oh, and then 7 acres got added on later, but that's, So,
This was 1977.
Yep.
And then it took 15 years for basically for this mechanism to be created and then for the land to be added to South.
And it wasn't really created as a mechanism. It was an informal mechanism for, many, many years, decades, where, the legislature people would ask for money, the DNR would ask for money, and the legislature would appropriate it. And then the last current, and she's going to be gone soon, Commissioner of Public Lands, Hilary France, actually never asked for money for transfers. So people got generally pissed off, and I believe it passed last year. There's now a formal program.
Oh, okay. So this formal program there was an informal program for a long time, but the formal program is very new.
Right. And, it's getting funded now, of course, because of the legacy forest movement. But we get diverted into that. Okay. So fast forward, that was kind of the milieu I came into when I hit the island. We had, getting a zoning code passed, the no spray movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then in late 1987, Trillium arrived. 88, and just cutting everything in sight as fast as they could. 2,000 acres. They had somewhere over 2,000 acres, like 2,700 acres or so. Yeah. And we just kind of went, what's going on? Where we lived then, we could go out our back door and I'll walk a quarter mile through the woods to one of the sites.
Less than that.
And it was just full of wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
Site should have been left totally alone. We actually had county support initially from staff, but then, of course, the commissioners, hard to get commissioners support anything regarding conservation at all back then, as opposed to lip service, which they all do now. So we blockaded one of their logging sites there. Basically we blockaded another site by that's actually kitty corner to the state park, which is now, most of it is now the Trillium Woods. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's how it got the name Trillium Woods.
It's because of the company that was actually trying to cut it all down.
There, and we really didn't want to name that, but we couldn't stop the land trust.
Isn't Trillium also a little flower that has the 3
little native flower that is not uncommon in forest understories in Western Washington, relatively undisturbed forest.
Mm-hmm. So that's ironic. That's an ironic name for a company.
It doesn't occur on Whidbey, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, so at one point there, we got ready to do the blockade of the Big Muddy, as we called that particular site. We blockaded the logging show, and then we came back later for an early Earth Day to plant on it, and it looked really good. Trillium was going to have us arrested for planting trees out there, and he wouldn't ask for. We had TV stations interested, everybody's interested, and then a light bulb went off with Trillium after I did an interview with NPR down in Roma, and they called Trillium, and Trillium figured, maybe we should just ignore them, which is what they did. So we didn't, have a big news event out of it. But we had fun planting a lot of trees around there. The question was, what were we going to call ourselves for this event? And originally we used Island Earth First, but you have to understand Earth First was hugely controversial, doing direct action against loggers, the blessed loggers. Instead, I think Michael Serafinoff.
Yeah, it was Michael.
Yeah, came up with the name of Whidbey Environmental Action Network. It sort of went, well, we're on Whidbey, and we're a group, not really a group, we're a network, or we're action. Oh, Whidbey Environmental Action. So that's where WEAN came from, and it remained this kind of not really coherent thing at all.
This was a really rich conversation that definitely went over an hour. So we've split this conversation into 2 parts. Hear the rest of my conversation with Marianne and Steve on episode 2. You don't want to miss the second half of this conversation. Marianne and Steve go into the actions of Whidbey Environmental Action Network over the last 40 years, and they answer questions about what their hopes and dreams are for the next generation of environmental activists and how they see the community getting involved. So it's a really great conversation. It only gets better from here. See you there.
Another man up in the pulpit in the state house, head of the table with a black pen, scratching egos, talking too loud. Externalize every outcome, every warm gun, every profit, and kneeling down to the flashing numbers, the NASDAQ, the cold constructs, running backwards to just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. Unlearning every lesson that our mothers tried to teach us.
This podcast is a production of the Whidbey Environmental Action Network and is made possible by our generous donors. Produced, edited, and mixed by me, Amanda Bullis. Special thanks to Marianne and Steve for their years of service through action and for lending their voices to this podcast. To WEAN's Executive Director, Marnie Jackson, and our board for their leadership. Special thanks to Whidbey musician and WEAN board member Nathaniel Talbot for letting us use his track, Intuition, from the album Animal, available on Bandcamp.
Back at the workplace, every day on your paycheck, a volume of confidence against the idea of your body being put into your own hands. So please don't hold it, please don't hold it, please don't hold it back. Unleash the power, straight logic of compassion. What I need now ain't that old religion or the cold hard facts. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Stepping out of the shadow of a false man's allegory, slowly erasing that old violence from the story. Recoupling emotion, slow emotion to intelligence, granting the planters, healers, teachers, feelers a new relevance. What I need now ain't that old religion or the cold